Chapter 3, Defining and Generating Sleep, Time Dilation and What We Learned from a Baby in 1952. Perhaps you walked into your living room late one night while chatting with a friend. You saw a family member, let's call her Jessica, lying still on the couch, not making a peep, body recumbent and head lolling to one side. Immediately, you turned to your friend and said, "Shish, Jessica's sleeping." But how did you know? It took a split second of time, yet there was little doubt in your mind about Jessica's state. Why, instead, did you not think Jessica was in a coma, or worse, dead? Self-identifying sleep. Your lightning-quick judgment of Jessica being asleep was likely correct. And perhaps you accidentally confirmed it by knocking something over and waking her up. Over time, we have all become incredibly good at recognizing a number of signals that suggest that another individual is asleep. So reliable are these signs that there now exists a set of observable features that scientists agree indicate the presence of sleep in humans and other species. The Jessica vignette illustrates nearly all of these clues. First, sleeping organisms adopt a stereotypical position. In land animals, this is often horizontal, as was Jessica's position on the couch. Second, and related, sleeping organisms have lowered muscle tone. This is most evident in the relaxation of postural anti-gravity skeletal muscles, those that keep you upright, preventing you from collapsing to the floor. As these muscles ease their tension in light and then deep sleep, the body will slouch down. A sleeping organism will be draped over whatever supports it underneath, most evident in Jessica's listing head position. Third, sleeping individuals show no overt displays of communication or responsivity. Jessica showed no signs of orienting to you as you entered the room, as she would have when awake. The fourth defining feature of sleep is that it's easily reversible, differentiating it from coma, anesthesia, hibernation, and death. Recall that upon knocking the item over in the room, Jessica awoke. Fifth, as we established in the previous chapter, sleep adheres to a reliable timed pattern across 24 hours, instructed by the circadian rhythm coming from the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus pacemaker. Humans are diurnal, so we have a preference for being awake throughout the day and sleeping at night. Now let me ask you a rather different question. How do you, yourself, know that you have slept? You make this self-assessment even more frequently than that of sleep in others. Each morning, with luck, you return to the waking world knowing that you have been asleep. So sensitive is this self-assessment of sleep that you can go a step further, gauging when you've had good or bad quality sleep. This is another way of measuring sleep, a first-person phenomenological assessment distinct from signs that you use to determine sleep in another. Here, also, there are universal indicators that offer a convincing conclusion of sleep, too, in fact. First is the loss of external awareness. You stop perceiving the outside world. You are no longer conscious of all that surrounds you, at least not explicitly. In actual fact, your ears are still hearing, your eyes, though closed, are still capable of seeing. This is similarly true for the other sensory organs of the nose, smell, the tongue, taste, and the skin, touch. All these signals still flood into the center of your brain, but it is here, in the sensory convergence zone, where that journey ends while you sleep. The signals are blocked by a perceptual barricade set up in a structure called the thalamus. Thal-muse. A smooth, oval-shaped object just smaller than a lemon, the thalamus is the sensory gate of the brain. The thalamus decides which sensory signals are allowed through its gate, and which are not. Should they gain privileged passage, they are sent up to the cortex at the top of your brain, where they are consciously perceived. By locking its gates shut at the onset of healthy sleep, the thalamus imposes a sensory blackout in the brain, preventing onward travel of those signals up to the cortex. As a result, you are no longer consciously aware of the information broadcasts being transmitted from your outer sense organs. At this moment, your brain has lost waking contact with the outside world that surrounds you. Said another way, you are now asleep. The second feature that instructs your own, self-determined judgment of sleep is a sense of time distortion experienced in two contradictory ways. At the most obvious level, you lose your conscious sense of time when you sleep. Tantamount to a chronometric void. Consider the last time you fell asleep on an airplane. When you woke up, you probably checked a clock to see how long you had been asleep. Why? Because your explicit tracking of time was ostensibly lost while you Slept. It is this feeling of a time cavity that, in waking retrospect, makes you confident you've been asleep, but while your conscious mapping of time is lost during sleep, at a non-conscious level, time continues to be catalogued by the brain with incredible precision. I'm sure you have had the experience of needing to wake up the next morning at a specific time. Perhaps you had to catch an early morning flight. Before bed, you diligently set your alarm for 6 a.m. Miraculously, however, you woke up at 5:58 a.m., unassisted, right before the alarm. Your brain, it seems, is still capable of logging time with quite remarkable precision while asleep. Like so many other operations occurring within the brain, you simply don't have explicit access to this accurate time knowledge during sleep. It all flies below the radar of consciousness, surfacing only when needed. One last temporal distortion deserves mention here, that of time dilation in dreams, beyond sleep itself. Time isn't quite time within dreams. It is most often elongated. Consider the last time you hit the snooze button in your alarm, having been woken from a dream. Mercifully, you are giving yourself another delicious 5 minutes of sleep. You go right back to dreaming. After the allotted 5 minutes, your alarm clock faithfully sounds again, yet that's not what it felt like to you. During those 5 minutes of actual time, you may have felt like you were dreaming for an hour, perhaps more. Unlike the phase of sleep, where you are not dreaming, wherein you lose all awareness of time, in dreams, you continue to have a sense of time. It's simply not particularly accurate. More often than not, dream time is stretched out and prolonged relative to real time. Although the reasons for such time dilation are not fully understood, recent experimental recordings of brain cells in rats give tantalizing clues. In the experiment, rats were allowed to run around a maze. As the rats learned the spatial layout, the researchers recorded signature patterns of brain cell firing. The scientists did not stop recording from these memory imprinting cells when the rats subsequently fell asleep. They continued to eavesdrop on the brain during the different stages of slumber, including rapid eye movement (REM) sleep, the stage in which humans principally dream. The first striking result was that the signature pattern of brain cell firing that occurred as the rats were learning the maze subsequently reappeared during sleep over and over again. That is, memories were being replayed at the level of brain cell activity as the rats snoozed. The second, more striking finding was the speed of replay. During REM sleep, the memories were being replayed far more slowly, at just half or quarter the speed of that measured when the rats were awake and learning the maze. This slow neural recounting of the day's events is the best evidence we have to date explaining our own protracted experience of time in human REM sleep. This dramatic deceleration of neural time may be the reason we believe our dream life lasts far longer than our alarm clocks otherwise assert. An infant revelation: 2 types of sleep. Though we have all determined that someone is asleep, or that we have been asleep, the gold standard scientific verification of sleep requires the recording of signals, using electrodes, arising from 3 different regions: 1. Brainwave activity, 2. Eye movement activity, and 3. Muscle activity. Collectively, these signals are grouped together under the blanket term polysomnography (PSG), meaning a readout graph of sleep somnus that is made up of multiple signals poly. It was using this collection of measures that arguably the most important discovery in all of sleep research was made in 1952 at the University of Chicago by Eugene Osirinsky, then a graduate student, and Professor Nathaniel Kleitman. Famed for the Mammoth Cave experiment discussed in Chapter 2, Osirinsky had been carefully documenting the eye movement patterns of human infants during the day and night. He noticed that there were periods of sleep when the eyes would rapidly dart from side to side underneath their lids. Furthermore, these sleep phases were always accompanied by remarkably active brain waves, almost identical to those observed from a brain that is wide awake. Sandwiching these earnest phases of active sleep were longer swaths of time when the eyes would calm and rest still. During these quiescent time periods, the brainwaves would also become calm, slowly ticking up and down. As if that weren't strange enough, Osirinsky also observed that these 2 phases of slumber, sleep with eye movements, sleep with no eye movements, would repeat in a somewhat regular pattern throughout the night, over, and over, and over again. With classic professorial skepticism, his mentor, Kleitman, wanted to see the results replicated before he would entertain their validity. With his propensity for including his nearest and dearest in his experimentation, he chose his infant daughter, Esther, for this investigation. The findings held up. At that moment Kleitman and Oserinsky realized the profound discovery they had made: humans don't just sleep, but cycle through two completely different types of sleep. They named these sleep stages based on their defining ocular features: non-rapid eye movement, or NREM, sleep, and rapid eye movement, or REM, sleep, together with the assistance of another graduate student of Kleitman's at the time, William Dement. Kleitman and Oserinsky further demonstrated that REM sleep, in which brain activity was almost identical to that when we are awake, was intimately connected to the experience we call dreaming, and is often described as dream sleep. NREM sleep received further dissection in the years thereafter, being subdivided into 4 separate stages, unimaginatively named NREM stages 1 to 4. We sleep researchers are a creative bunch, increasing in their depth. Stages 3 and 4 are therefore the deepest stages of NREM sleep you experience, with depth being defined as the increasing difficulty required to wake an individual out of NREM stages 3 and 4, compared with NREM stages 1 or 2, the sleep cycle. In the years since Esther's slumber revelation, we have learned that the two-stage soft sleep, NREM and REM, play out in a recurring, push-pull battle for brain domination across the night. The cerebral war between the two is won and lost. Every 90 minutes, two ruled first by NREM sleep, followed by the comeback of REM sleep. No sooner has the battle finished than it starts anew, replaying every 90 minutes. Tracing this remarkable roller coaster ebb and flow across the night reveals the quite beautiful cycling architecture of sleep, depicted in Figure 8. On the vertical axis are the different brain states, with wake at the top, then REM sleep, and then the descending stages of NREM sleep, stages 1 to 4. On the horizontal axis is time of night, starting on the left at about 11 p.m. through until 7 a.m. on the right. The technical name for this graphic is a hypnogram, a sleep graph. Had I not added the vertical dashed lines demarcating each 90-minute cycle, you may have protested that you could not see a regularly repeating 90-minute pattern. At least not the one you were expecting from my description. Above, the cause is another peculiar feature of sleep, a lopsided profile of sleep stages. While it is true that we flip-flop back and forth between NREM and REM sleep throughout the night every 90 minutes, the ratio of NREM sleep to REM sleep within each 90-minute cycle changes dramatically across the night. In the first half of the night, the vast majority of our 90-minute cycles are reconsumed by deep NREM sleep, and very little REM sleep, as can be seen in cycle 1 of the figure above. But as we transition through into the second half of the night, this seesaw balance shifts, with most of the time dominated by REM sleep, with little, if any, deep NREM sleep. Cycle 5 is a perfect example of this REM-rich type of sleep. Why did Mother Nature design this strange, complex equation of unfolding sleep stages? Why cycle between NREM and REM sleep over and over? Why not obtain all of the required NREM sleep first, followed by all of the necessary REM sleep second, or vice versa? If that's too much a gamble on the off chance that an animal only obtains a partial night of sleep at some point, then why not keep the ratio within each cycle the same, placing similar proportions of eggs in both baskets, as it were, rather than putting most of them in one early on, and then inverting that imbalance later in the night? Why vary it? It sounds like an exhausting amount of evolutionary hard work to have designed such a convoluted system, and put it into biological action. We have no scientific consensus as to why our sleep, and that of all other mammals and birds, cycles in this repeatable but dramatically asymmetric pattern, though a number of theories exist. One theory I have offered is that the uneven back and forth interplay between NREM and REM sleep is necessary to elegantly remodel and update our neural circuits at night, and in doing so manageth finite storage space within the brain. Forced by the known storage capacity imposed by a set number of neurons and connections within their memory structures, our brains must find that sweet spot between retention of old information and leaving sufficient room for the new. Balancing this storage equation requires identifying which memories are fresh and salient, and which memories that currently exist are overlapping, redundant, or simply no longer relevant. As we will discover in Chapter 6, a key function of deep NREM sleep, which predominates early in the night, is to do the work of weeding out and removing unnecessary neural connections. In contrast, the dreaming stage of REM sleep, which prevails later in the night, plays a role in strengthening those connections. Combine these two, and we have at least one parsimonious explanation for why the two types of sleep cycle across the night, and why those cycles are initially dominated by NREM sleep early on, with REM sleep reigning supreme in the second half of the night. Consider the creation of a piece of sculpture from a block of clay. It starts with placing a large amount of raw material onto a pedestal. That entire mass of stored autobiographical memories, new and old, offered up to sleep each night. Next comes an initial and extensive removal of superfluous matter, long stretches of NREM sleep, after which brief intensification of early details can be made, short REM periods. Following this first session, the culling hands return for a second round of deep excavation, another long NREM sleep phase, followed by a little more enhancing of some fine-grained structures that have emerged, slightly more REM sleep. After several more cycles of work, the balance of sculptural need has shifted. All core features have been hewn from the original mass of raw material. With only the important clay remaining, the work of the sculptor, and the tools required, must shift toward the goal of strengthening the elements and enhancing features of that which remains, a dominant need. Fourth, skills of REM sleep, and little work remaining for NREM sleep. In this way, sleep may elegantly manage and solve our memory storage crisis, with the general excavatory force of NREM sleep dominating early, after which the etching hand of REM sleep blends, interconnects, and adds details. Since life's experience is ever-changing, demanding that our memory catalog be updated ad infinitum, our autobiographical sculpture of stored experience is never complete. As a result, the brain always requires a new bout of sleep and its varied stages each night, so as to auto-update our memory networks based on the events of the prior day. This account is one reason, of many, I suspect, explaining the cycling nature of NREM and REM sleep, and the imbalance of their distribution across the night. A danger resides in this sleep profile wherein NREM dominates early in the night, followed by an REM sleep dominance later in the morning, one of which most of the general public are unaware. Let's say that you go to bed this evening at midnight. But instead of waking up at 8 a.m., getting a full 8 hours of sleep, you must wake up at 6 a.m., because of an early morning meeting or because you are an athlete whose coach demands early morning practices. What percent of sleep will you lose? The logical answer is 25%, since waking up at 6 a.m. will lop off 2 hours of sleep from what would otherwise be a normal 8 hours. But that's not entirely true. Since your brain desires most of its REM sleep in the last part of the night, which is to say the late morning hours, you will lose 60 to 90% of all your REM sleep, even though you are losing 25% of your total sleep time. It works both ways. If you wake up at 8 a.m., but don't go to bed until 2 a.m., then you lose a significant amount of deep NREM sleep, similar to an unbalanced diet in which you only eat carbohydrates and are left malnourished by the absence of protein, shortchanging the brain of either NREM or REM sleep, both of which serve critical, though different, brain and body functions, results in a myriad of physical and mental ill health, as we will see in later chapters. When it comes to sleep, there is no such thing as burning the candle at both ends, or even at one end, and getting away with it. How your brain generates sleep. If I brought you into my sleep laboratory this evening at the University of California, Berkeley, placed electrodes in your head and face, and let you fall asleep, what would your sleeping brainwaves look like? How different would those patterns of brain activity be to those you are experiencing right now, as you read this sentence, awake? How do these different electrical brain changes explain why you are conscious in one state, wake, non-conscious in another, NREM sleep, and delusionally conscious, or dreaming, in the third, REM sleep? Assuming you are a healthy young, midlife adult, we will discuss sleep in childhood, old age, and disease a little later. The three wavy lines in Figure 9 reflect the different types of electrical activity I would record from your brain. Each line represents 30 seconds of brainwave activity from these three different states: sad face, 1. Wakefulness, 2. Deep NREM sleep, and 3. REM sleep. Prior to bed, your waking brain activity is frenetic, meaning that the brainwaves are cycling, going up and down, perhaps 30 or 40 times per second, similar to a very fast drumbeat. This is termed fast frequency brain activity. Moreover, there is no reliable pattern to these brainwaves, that is, the drum beat is not only fast, but also erratic. If I asked you to predict the next few seconds of the activity by tapping along to the beat, based on what came before, you would not be able to do so. The brainwaves are really that asynchronous, their drumbeat has no discernible rhythm. Even if I converted the brainwaves into sound, which I have done in my laboratory in a sonification of sleep project, and is eerie to behold, you would find it impossible to dance to. These are the electrical hallmarks of full wakefulness, fast frequency, chaotic brainwave activity. You may have been expecting your general brainwave activity to look beautifully coherent and highly synchronous while awake, matching the ordered pattern of your mostly logical thought during waking consciousness. The contradictory electrical chaos is explained by the fact that different parts of your waking brain are processing different pieces of information at different moments in time and in different ways. When summed together, they produce what appears to be a discombobulated pattern of activity recorded by the electrodes placed in your head. As an analogy, consider a large football stadium filled with thousands of fans. Dangling over the middle of the stadium is a microphone. The individual people in the stadium represent individual brain cells, seated in different parts of the stadium, as they are clustered in different regions of the brain. The microphone is the electrode, sitting on top of the head, a recording device. Before the game starts, all of the individuals in the stadium are speaking about different things at different times. They are not having the same conversation in sync. Instead, they are desynchronized in their individual discussions. As a result, the summed chatter that we pick up from the overhead microphone is chaotic, lacking a clear, unified voice. When an electrode is placed on a subject's head, as done in my laboratory, it is measuring the summed activity of all the neurons below the surface of the scalp. As they process different streams of information, sounds, sights, smells, feelings, emotions, at different moments in time and in different underlying locations, processing that much information of such varied kinds means that your brainwaves are very fast, frenetic, and chaotic. Once settled into bed at my sleep laboratory, with lights out and perhaps a few tosses and turns here and there, you will successfully cast off from the shores of wakefulness into sleep. First, you will wade out into the shallows of light NREM sleep, stages 1 and 2. Thereafter, you will enter the deeper waters of stages 3 and 4 of NREM sleep, which are grouped together under the blanket term slow wave sleep. Returning to the brainwave patterns of Figure 9, and focusing on the middle line, you can understand why. In deep, slow-wave sleep, the up and down tempo for your brainwave activity dramatically decelerates, perhaps just 2 to 4 waves per second, 10 times slower than the fervent speed of brain activity you were expressing while awake. As remarkable, the slow waves of NREM are also far more synchronous and reliable than those of your waking brain activity. So reliable, in fact, that you could predict the next few bars of NREM sleep's electrical song based on those that came before. Were I to convert the deep rhythmic activity of your NREM sleep into sound and play it back to you in the morning, which we have also done for people in the same sonification of sleep project, you'd be able to find its rhythm and move in time, gently swaying to the slow, pulsing measure, but something else would become apparent as you listened and swayed to the throb of deep sleep brainwaves. Every now and then a new sound would be overlaid on top of the slow wave rhythm. It would be brief, lasting only a few seconds, but it would always occur on the downbeat of the slow wave cycle. You would perceive it as a quick trill of sound, not dissimilar to the strong rolling R in certain languages, such as Hindi or Spanish, or a very fast purr from a pleased cat. What you are hearing is a sleep spindle, a punchy burst of brainwave activity that often festoons the tail end of each individual slow wave. Sleep spindles occur during both the deep and the lighter stages of NREM sleep, even before the slow, powerful brainwaves of deep sleep start to rise up and dominate. One of the Ermini functions is to operate like nocturnal soldiers who protect sleep by shielding the brain from external noises. The more powerful and frequent an individual's sleep spindles, the more resilient they are to external noises that would otherwise awaken the sleeper. Returning to the slow waves of deep sleep, we have also discovered something fascinating about their site of origin, and how they sweep across the surface of the brain. Place your finger between your eyes, just above the bridge of your nose, now slide it up your forehead about 2 inches. When you go to bed tonight, thesis where most of your deep sleep brainwaves will be generated, right in the middle of your frontal lobes. It is the epicenter, or hot spot, from which most of your deep, slow-wave sleep emerges. However, the waves of deep sleep do not radiate out in perfect circles. Instead, almost all of your deep sleep brainwaves will travel in one direction, from the front of your brain to the back. They are like the sound waves emitted from a speaker, which predominantly travel in one direction, from the speaker outward. It is always louder in front of a speaker than behind it. Unlike a speaker broadcasting across a vast expanse, the slow waves that you generate tonight will gradually dissipate in strength as they make their journey to the back of the brain, without rebound or return. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, as scientists began measuring these slow brainwaves, an understandable assumption was made: this leisurely, even lazy-looking electrical pace of brainwave activity must reflect a brain that is idle, or even dormant. It was a reasonable hunch considering that the deepest, slowest brainwaves of NREM sleep can resemble those we see in patients under anesthesia, or even those in certain forms of coma. But this assumption was utterly wrong. Nothing could be further from the truth. What you are actually experiencing during deep NREM sleep is one of the most epic displays of neural collaboration that we know of. Through an astonishing act of self-organization, many thousands of brain cells have all decided to unite and sing, or fire, in time. Every time I watch this stunning act of neural synchrony occurring at night in my own research laboratory, I am humbled. Sleep is truly an object of awe, returning to the analogy of the microphone dangling above the football stadium. Consider the game of sleep now in play. The crowd, those thousands of brain cells, has shifted from their individual chitter-chatter before the game, wakefulness, to a unified state, deep sleep. Their voices have joined in a lockstep, mantra-like chant, the chant of deep NREM sleep. All at once, they exuberantly shout out, creating the tall spike of brainwave activity, and then fall silent for several seconds, producing the deep, protracted trough of the wave. From our stadium microphone we pick up a clearly defined roar from the underlying crowd, followed by a long breath pause. Realizing that the rhythmic incantare of deep NREM slow-wave sleep was actually a highly active, meticulously coordinated state of cerebral unity, scientists were forced to abandon any cursory notions of deep sleep as a state of semi-hibernation or dull stupor, understanding this stunning electrical harmony, which ripples across the surface of your brain hundreds of times each night, also helps explain your loss of external consciousness. It starts below the surface of the brain, within the thalamus. Recall that as we fall asleep, the thalamus, the sensory gate, seated deep in the middle of the brain, blocks the transfer of perceptual signals, sound, sight, touch, etc., up to the top of the brain, or the cortex. By severing perceptualities with the outside world, not only do we lose our sense of consciousness, explaining why we do not dream in deep NREM sleep, nor do we keep explicit track of time, this also allows the cortex to relax into its default mode of functioning. That default mode is what we call deep slow-wave sleep. It is an active, deliberate, but highly synchronous state of brain activity. It is a near state of nocturnal cerebral meditation, though I should note that it is very different from the brainwave activity of waking meditative states. In this shamanistic state of deep NREM sleep can be found a veritable treasure trove of mental and physical benefits for your brain and body, respectively, a bounty that we will fully explore in Chapter 6. However, one brain benefit, the saving of memories, deserves further mention at this moment in our story, as it serves as an elegant example of what those deep, slow brainwaves are capable of. Have you ever taken a long road trip in your car and noticed that at some point in the journey, the FM radio stations you've been listening to begin dropping out in signal strength? In contrast, AM radio stations remain solid. Perhaps you've driven to a remote location and tried and failed to find a new FM radio station. Switch over to the AM band, however, and several broadcasting channels are still available. The explanation lies in the radio waves themselves, including the two different speeds of the FM and AM transmissions. FM uses faster frequency radio waves that go up and down many more times per second than AM radio waves. One advantage of FM radio waves is that they can carry higher, richer loads of information, and hence they sound better. But there's a big disadvantage: FM waves run out of steam quickly, like a muscle-bound sprinter who can only cover short distances. AM broadcasts employ a much slower, longer radio wave, akin to a lean long-distance runner. While AM radio waves cannot match the muscular, dynamic quality of FM radio, the pedestrian pace of AM radio waves gives them the ability to cover vast distances with less fade. Longer range broadcasts are therefore possible with the slow waves of AM radio, allowing for reaching communication between very distant geographic locations. As your brain shifts from the fast frequency activity of waking to the slower, more measured pattern of deep NREM sleep, the very same long-range communication advantage becomes possible. The steady, slow, synchronous waves that sweep across the brain during deep sleep open up communication possibilities between distant regions of the brain, allowing them to collaboratively send and receive their different repositories of stored experience. In this regard, you can think of each individual slow wave of NREM sleep as a courier, able to carry packets of information between different anatomical brain centers. One benefit of these traveling deep sleep brainwaves is a file transfer process. Each night, the long-range brainwaves of deep sleep will move memory packets, recent experiences, from a short-term storage site, which is fragile, to a more permanent, and thus safer, long-term storage location. We therefore consider waking brainwave activity as that principally concerned with the reception of the outside sensory world, while the state of deep NREM slow wave sleep donates a state of inward reflection, one that fosters information transfer and the distillation of memories. If wakefulness is dominated by reception, and NREM sleep by reflection, what then happens during REM sleep, the dreaming state? Returning to Figure 9, the last line of electrical brainwave activity is that which I would observe coming from your brain in the sleep lab as you entered into REM sleep. Despite being asleep, the associated brainwave activity bears no resemblance to that of deep NREM slow wave sleep, the middle line in the figure. Instead, REM sleep brain activity is an almost perfect replica of that seen during attentive, alert wakefulness, the top line in the figure. Indeed, recent MRI scanning studies have found that there are individual parts of the brain that are up to 30% more active during REM sleep than when we are awake. For these reasons, REM sleep has also been called paradoxical sleep, a brain that appears awake, yet a body that is clearly asleep. It is often impossible to distinguish REM sleep from wakefulness using just electrical brainwave activity. In REM sleep, there is a return of the same faster frequency brainwaves that are once again desynchronized. The many thousands of brain cells in your cortex thought previously unified in a slow, synchronized chat during deep NREM sleep have returned to frantically processing different informational pieces at different speeds and times in different brain regions, typical of wakefulness. But you're not awake. Rather, you are sound asleep. So what information is being processed, since it is certainly not information from the outside world at that time? As is the case when you are awake, the sensory gate of the thalamus once again swings open during REM sleep. But the nature of the gate is different. It is not sensations from the outside that are allowed to journey to the cortex during REM sleep. Rather, signals of emotions, motivations, and memories, past and present, are all played out on the big screens of our visual, auditory, and kinesthetic sensory cortices in the brain. Each and every night, REM sleep ushers you into a preposterous theater wherein you are treated to a bizarre, highly associative carnival of autobiographical themes. When it comes to information processing, think of the wake state principally as reception, experiencing and constantly learning the world around you. NREM sleep is reflection, storing and strengthening those raw ingredients of new facts and skills, and REM sleep as integration, interconnecting these raw ingredients with each other, with all past experiences, and, in doing so, building an ever more accurate model of how the world works, including innovative insights and problem-solving abilities. Since the electrical brainwaves of REM sleep and wake are so similar, how can I tell which of the two you are experiencing as you lie in the bedroom of the sleep laboratory next to the control room? The telltale player in this regard is your body, specifically its muscles. Before putting you to bed in the sleep laboratory, we would have applied electrodes to your body, in addition to those we affix to your head. While awake, even lying in bed and relaxed, there remains a degree of overall tension, or tone, in your muscles. This steady muscular hum is easily detected by the electrodes listening in on your body. As you pass into NREM sleep, some of that muscle tension disappears, but much remains. Gearing up for the leap into REM sleep. However, an impressive change occurs. Mere seconds before the dreaming phase begins, and for as long as that REM sleep period lasts, you are completely paralyzed. There is no tone in the voluntary muscles of your body. None, whatsoever. If I were to quietly come into the room and gently lift up your body without waking you, it would be completely limp, like a rag doll. Rest assured that your involuntary muscles, those that control automatic operations such as breathing, continue to operate and maintain life during sleep. But all other muscles become lax. This feature, termed atonia, an absence of tone, referring here to the muscles, is instigated by a powerful disabling signal that is transmitted down the full length of your spinal cord from your brainstem. Once put in place, the postural body muscles, such as the biceps of your arms and the quadriceps of your legs, lose all tension and strength. No longer will they respond to commands from your brain. You have, in effect, become an embodied prisoner, incarcerated by REM sleep. Fortunately, after serving the detention sentence of the REM sleep cycle, your body is freed from physical captivity as the REM sleep phase ends. This striking dissociation during the dreaming state, where the brain is highly active but the body is immobilized, allows sleep scientists to easily recognize, and therefore separate, REM sleep brainwaves from wakeful ones. Why did evolution decide to outlaw muscle activity during REM sleep? Because by eliminating muscle activity you are prevented from acting out your dream experience. During REM sleep, there is a non-stop barrage of motor commands swirling around the brain, and they underlie the movement-rich experience of dreams. Wise, then, of Mother Nature to have tailored a physiological straitjacket that forbids these fictional movements from becoming reality, especially considering that you've stopped consciously perceiving your surroundings. You can well imagine the calamitous upshot of falsely enacting a dream fight, or a frantic sprint from an approaching dream foe, while your eyes are closed and you have no comprehension of the world around you. It wouldn't take long before you quickly left the gene pool. The brain paralyzes the body so the mind can dream safely. How do we know these movement commands are actually occurring while someone dreams beyond the individual simply waking up and telling you they were having a running dream or a fighting dream? The sad answer is that this paralysis mechanism can fail in some people, particularly later in life. Consequentially, they convert these dream-related motor impulses into real-world physical actions. As we shall read about in Chapter 11, the repercussions can be tragic. Finally, and not to be left out of the descriptive REM sleep picture, is the very reason for its name, corresponding rapid eye movements. Your eyes remain still in their sockets during deep NREM sleep. 3 yet electrodes that we place above and below your eyes tell a very different ocular story when you begin to dream, the very same story that Kleitman and Oserinsky unearthed in 1952 when observing infant sleep. During REM sleep, there are phases when your eyeballs will jag, with urgency, left to right, and so on. At first, scientists assumed that these rat-a-tat-tat eye movements corresponded to the tracking of visual experience in dreams. This is not true. Instead, the eye movements are intimately linked with the physiological creation of REM sleep, and reflect something even more extraordinary than the passive apprehension of moving objects within dream space. This phenomenon is chronicled in detail in Chapter 9. Are we the only creatures that experience these varied stages of sleep? Do any other animals have REM sleep? Do they dream? Let us find out.